In terms of professional opportunities, if you have a really good reputation, a really good brand, those leads will always keep banging down your door. It's a win-win in that sense. It's a no-brainer for someone wanting to start something on their own.
You've mentioned that you like putting yourself out there, but you kind of hate it. How have you overcome this self-doubt and continued to step into the spotlight?
It all kind of changed for me when I realized no one actually cares. If you want better opportunities, it's probably the way forward.
For someone who wants to make a big impact in the power platform space, like what is the key piece of advice that you would give to that person?
Just show up. If you want to make an impact, I'd say definitely just...
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Power Talks. My name is Griffin, the host of the Citizen Developer channel. But I just want to say before we introduce today's guest, I just want to make a housekeeping announcement that the Power Talk series is now cross-platform. So I guess I actually have to start calling it a podcast now. But nonetheless, however you like to listen or consume podcasts, you can find the Power Talk series on that platform, and there'll be a link in the description down below for those. Okay, cool. Into the conversation today, I'm joined by super special guest, Howdang Rashid. Howdang, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to get right into the conversation of, in getting to know you, you've mentioned that you like putting yourself out there, but you kind of hate it at the same time. And I think there's a lot to be said here. I wanted to ask you, how have you overcome this self-doubt and continued to step into the spotlight, I guess we could call it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a pleasure to be here, Griffin. So thank you for the invite. I guess it all kind of changed for me when I realized no one actually cares what you're doing online, because that's just everyone's doing it, right? I feel like nowadays there's just so much content. There's just so many people putting so much stuff out. I think they either care about your post and get some value out of it, or they just skip over it and forget it ever happened. And then you have that kind of off chance you say something controversial, and then people forget about it in a few weeks anyway. So yeah, I think it's just that mindset of people really don't care. And I feel like if you want better opportunities, it's probably the way forward to be heard. So yeah, I think with all that in mind, I was like, I'm just gonna keep doing it, even though it makes me cringe.
What have you, why do you feel like growing maybe your personal brand online or different things, why do you feel like that's given you opportunities? And maybe speaking to the person that doesn't, is maybe scared or kind of is thinking, maybe I could start doing this. What would you kind of say to that person as far as the opportunities that it's given you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's something to be said for people who don't like putting themselves out there, and that's okay. I don't want to push anyone to do this if they genuinely don't want to. Some people want to live their life in private. Some people don't want anything about them on the internet, and I think there's definitely a huge respect to be had there. So I definitely want to start off by saying that. I'd say to the people who are wanting to make that jump, sorry, Griffin, what was the question again? If you don't mind repeating.
That's totally okay. What are the opportunities, I guess, that you've maybe, the benefits, I guess, that you have experienced to stepping out there, creating LinkedIn posts, even though nobody cares about them, kind of those things that you said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, confidence is definitely a big one. I think when you put yourself out there, and even if you start in a small way, for example, start with writing and blog posts and those sorts of things, just getting your thoughts onto a piece of paper, it just allows you to articulate yourself much better. And I started my podcast, and Griffin, I'm sure you've had the same experience, but just speaking to people, interacting with people, engaging with people, you learn so much. And I feel like there's genuine value to be said there. I think in terms of professional opportunities, I've realized after COVID, a lot of people have wanted to have their own businesses, a lot of people have wanted to go freelance. I think in order to do that, and a lot of people who want to do that have families, and they can't really have a month without putting food on the table, so to speak, or having consistent income coming in, and that's not always the case. But I feel like if you have a really good reputation, a really good brand, those leads will always keep banging down your door. So I think it's a win-win in that sense, and I think it's a no-brainer for someone wanting to start something on their own.
Sure. So I want to ask you this question as well. Like, for someone who wants to make a big impact in the power platform space, like, what is the key piece of advice that you would give to that person?
Show up. Just
Show
show up.
up.
Show
Elaborate on
up
that.
every single day. Just do something small. Um, I know so many people who have so much to give, have so many unique experiences, and they've made one post, put it out there, and it hasn't got any views, and then they stop doing it forever. And that is a real shame, in my opinion, because I feel like everyone has some sort of unique value to give. So I'd say be consistent. And I think the first step in anything, you said you're big on health and fitness, Griffin, and I'm sure that's been a lifestyle. You played college football. Um, but as I'm sure you know, the first rule of the gym is show up. Like, you're going to look really stupid at the beginning. You're not going to know what you're doing. That was years ago for you, years ago for me, but it was the start. And I really like that analogy because I think you can take that anywhere in life. Look stupid. Don't be afraid of looking stupid in the beginning, and you'll start sucking less as you go. So I think if you want to make an impact, I'd say definitely just do something small every day. Like, one of my biggest problems when I started is I started this series called Solution Sunday. And that was basically just showing people how to take JavaScript and embed it into their forms. Now, these were really long blog posts. Like, each one took me like 3 or 4 hours to make. So it was really hard to be consistent because I was working full time. And then I obviously had to make these posts in between. I'd say find your medium. Like, blog posts work for some people, but I'd say do something where you can do it frequently. Like a blog post. If you take a whole blog post, there's probably 10, 11, even 7 like bits of content in there that you can grab and make like small posts about to kind of repurpose it. And yeah, just I think another piece of advice would be just find a place to store your ideas. Like, I feel like we get the ideas in the weirdest places. So having even like a notes page on your phone where you can just kind of store some things would be really helpful. But yeah, hopefully those are some like hacks. But I'd say the main principle is just show up every single day.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things I want to elaborate onto that. And the first one being the last thing you said there was like just writing down ideas. I don't know. For me, people get different ideas at different times. For me, I get ideas like right when I'm about to fall asleep. Like, I'm laying in bed. It's past bedtime and I'm laying here and my mind is just kind of, my creative sphere, I guess, is going crazy. And I have an idea. And I know, because I've had ideas, I'm like, oh, I'll remember in the morning. And I don't have any clue, So it's like, no, I need to roll over, put it in my phone, even if it's just to put it down, and then in the morning I can go and add it to my, my ideas bin, I guess, my end thing. So I totally relate to that. I also agree with what you're saying as far as just start. I think for me, especially me starting primarily as a YouTube channel, and some supplemental blog content as well. But like, when I first started, I knew absolutely nothing about YouTube, thumbnails, titles. I knew absolutely nothing about video production, lighting, cameras, none of that, nothing about audio, nothing about video editing. Like, I knew absolutely nothing. And my first video, while some people might think it's amazing, and I think the content was really good. It's an AI 900 certification study guide. I think the content's great. And it's one of my most viewed videos on the channel from search. But the video quality and audio and everything is horrible. I am like so embarrassed by it that video exists on the internet. And, stand alone, if you don't compare it to, I guess, my newer stuff, now that I've learned a lot, like maybe you wouldn't notice, but I notice. So I totally get it, coming from somebody who struggles with perfectionism. If you're listening out there, like, and you feel like you want to do it, like, just start and make every post, every video, just make it 1% better than the last one in some way. And like, that's I guess the principle that I have tried to apply. And then the third thing I wanted to say, you said you put out too much game right there. I'm digesting it now. Like, the third thing was, as far as like just show up, like be committed, find something to do every day. Like nobody has 4 hours a day to create, a blog post or whatever. And so finding ways to not only like a 1% improvement doesn't necessarily mean like your video got better, your blog got better. Maybe it's you created that same quality faster. You know what I mean? Like that's a 1% improvement as well. And so I think about things like that as far as improving and making the ability to create super easy. And so obviously doing video is a little tricky because you might have to turn on some lights or whatever. But like if I had to set a light up and set this up and set that up and then open up this screen and open up this screen and put this away and whatever, like every time I wanted to record, then I would be a lot less motivated to create, So I don't know, making it easy for yourself, I guess. So
100%.
That's I guess my perspective on it. I kind of wanted to, I don't know if you have anything else there before I transition the conversation a little bit.
Just one thing I'd say the longer it takes you to make your content, the more likely it is that you can repurpose it. Like, for example, take this podcast. Like, I've seen the shorts you make. You can get like 8, 9, maybe even 10 good shorts from an hour podcast. Like, and shorts are everywhere, right? And if you think about that, you've got your content for the week, you've got your podcast, and then you've got the shorts that go out every day. So I'd say the more time, usually, it goes to say, you spend on the content, probably the more likely you are to get more pieces of content from that. So I think there's definitely something to be said for that as well. But yeah, with that, we can move on to the next question.
No, it's all good. It's funny, I am actually in the process of, because again, something that, I'm working on is I want to start, actually pursuing growing this series more. And I basically do one LinkedIn post for the video, and that's about all I do. And so I'm excited for what the future holds. No spoilers, but there'll be some good short form content coming and everything. So I'm excited for all that from these conversations. But I guess awesome. Kind of not too much of a transition, but like the MVP thing. So you are a Microsoft MVP. And you mentioned that you became an MVP under a year, and that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. Could you share a little bit about how you achieved this milestone in case somebody is listening and wants to become an MVP and is starting at ground zero, or maybe they're I don't know. Does that kind of make sense? I guess what I'm asking, maybe what's the story too? What's the background story on Howdang to the MVP status?
Absolutely. So I discovered the Power Platform in an internship. So I was at university, and we have something called a placement year. You might have something similar in the States, but it's basically you go off for 1 year, you work for a company, and then you come back and do your final year at the university. So I found it at a company, which is a huge company, huge snacking company, global, and that's basically where I discovered the Power Platform. I got really excited. It was fun. I realized all the little pieces clicking together. I think like everyone starts, I started with a Canvas app, connected it to the SharePoint list, use a Power Automate flow to kind of make it all click. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. So I started pursuing that and kind of doing the certifications and stuff. But I wasn't sure at the time if it was kind of a viable career because I had never heard of it at university. So a few months went by, and this was 2000. Don't remember the year. 2021. ChatGPT came out, right? And it had just completely exploded the scene. And then Microsoft started using Copilot, and then the Copilot stack kind of became part of the Power Platform. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a thing. This is 100% going to be a viable career in a few years, even if it isn't now. Which at the time it was. I just wasn't sure. But yeah, then I went back to university after my internship, and I couldn't find a job in tech. So I worked at a retail job for a little while. This was November 2023. So I was working a retail job, and I managed to find a junior Power Platform developer position. I remember it's actually kind of a funny story, and if the people who hired me listen to this, they'll kind of laugh. But yeah, so I was a university student, and it was a full-time junior position, and there was no way I could do full-time, but I applied anyway because I was like, I just want to get out of retail because I was completely miserable. So I joined. So I applied to this role, and then they kind of reached out to me for an interview, and then I joined the interview, and they kind of looked at each other at the beginning, and they were like, we just looked at your CV and we saw you're still at university. Like, is that true? And I was like, yes. Like, is this already over? Like, are you guys just going to end the call? And then they looked at each other and they were like, no, let's see how it goes. So we've done the interview. And then I kind of left and didn't think too much about it. And I got an email on my phone saying I was invited for another interview. And I was like, oh, like, now they're considering me. Like, this is going to be really cool. So I put like all of my time, because I had to like present like a use case in the Power Platform. So they sent me a use case. I built it. I spent a lot of time doing that, a lot of nights, a lot of stress, but I put something together, and it was all worth it in the end because they really liked me. And I managed to get that role. So that was November 2023. I started in December 2023, and I got my MVP award in the following November 2024. So that's why I say it was kind of under 12 months, more or less 12 months, because my content creation journey, that's when it started. So then I started making posts and no one was reading them. There's actually a really nice infographic of like my engagements being completely like non-existent at the beginning, and then you kind of start seeing a little bit of a spike, which is why I just say show up. But yeah, I started making posts and I was like, all right, no one's reading this sucks. So then I made a course because I saw on Udemy there wasn't any free Power Platform courses. So I was like, all right, let me make a course. So it took me like 3 months to put that together. I put it out, got like a few thousand, I think I got like 1,000 students on that course, which was really cool. It was just an introduction to the Power Platform. And then that ended and I wasn't satisfied. So I was like, I'm going to make another course. So I made another course on AI Builder because I thought AI Builder was super exciting. And then I put that one on Udemy. And then from that point, I just got a bit more consistent with my content. I joined Mark Smith's 90-day mentoring challenge. I'm very vocal about this because he's a great mentor. I'm not sure if you've been on the program, but it's really good. And I remember the first call I joined, he gave a tad bit of advice, which I hope he doesn't mind me saying here, which was it's a numbers game in the sense of, it's just showing up, it's just being consistent, you'll get better with time. And then I used that advice wholeheartedly, kept doing it, and then an MVP reached out to me and said, have you been nominated? Like, the stuff you're doing is amazing. And I was like, no, I didn't even know that's how it worked. And then I got my application, sent it through, and November 2024 is when I got my award. So yeah, a bit long-winded, but that was kind of my story.
Hey, if you are finding this video impactful or insightful, be sure to like and subscribe. But more importantly, if you are wanting to learn more about the Microsoft Power Platform, then you are going to want to check out the completely free self-paced course that has all of the hand-picked content directly from me as the first link down in the description down below. This is going to teach you everything you need to know about the Power Platform to get started and pass your first few Microsoft certifications. I can honestly say that as a Power Platform consultant myself, that I love what I do, and I don't think many people in today's day and age can say that. If you are wanting to learn more, as I mentioned, be sure to check out the first link in the description down below to get in direct contact and connect with me. All right, let's get back to the conversation. Congrats, man. And you're not the first guest to mention Mark Smith's podcast, or not podcast, the group, I guess, the program. And so I hear good things. Mark, if you're out there, maybe I shouldn't spoil it. I want to do an episode. If anyone's listening this far in, you're a real one. I want to do an episode with him and his wife, Meg. Like, bring them both on the show. I think that could be interesting. So who knows? Yeah. I'm speaking it into existence. But yes. So I think that's super cool. And the story there and how, yeah, like you're saying, it felt like there was nothing, and tying into like what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. And so that's super enlightening. I mean, how has like contributing to the community really helped your learning and growth? Like, I understand, those courses and things were really beneficial for the people that partook in them, or, the people who are reading your blogs and, the things you're sharing. But like, how has it benefited you in a sense of helping you learn and doing those things? And because we've already kind of talked about how it grew your career and the opportunities there a little bit, but what are
Yeah.
your thoughts there?
Infinitely. I think we're in a time. It's a great time to be alive because we're connected with everybody. So we spoke about this a bit before the podcast, but it's a gift and a curse in a couple of ways. The nice side being that you can kind of connect with people who have so much more experience than you. So I'm 22. So comparing, sorry, speaking to someone who's in their 40s and their 50s, they've seen it all, they've done it all, they've done it again. Like, and it's like it can be one page in a book, it can be one sentence that they say, it can be one phrase that they use. It can be anything that just sparks that aha moment in your brain. So I think talking to as many people as possible is so important because you never know what that thing is going to be, if that makes sense. So you never know what that thing is going to be that shifts the gear and, takes you on that way. And for me, honestly, I joined Mark Smith's challenge around June, and he said that, and you can see the spike on the LinkedIn going up in July, just based on what he says, just based on having that consistency. And I genuinely think there's so much value to be taken from books, to be taken from other people, just people with more experience than you, different experiences than you. I think it's so important to get that and try and apply those lessons to your life. Yeah.
Man, boom. I don't think I can possibly add anything else to the game that you're saying there. So that's so good. I wanted to, I guess, maybe a transition on the conversation a little bit into like kind of things that you're excited about, and like Copilot and AI building and everything that's like super popular right now, and that I think a lot of people are excited to continue to learn and get their hands on. Like, what opportunities do you think that these will unlock for developers and organizations? And while I guess you like think about your answer to that, like what opportunities that these tools provide, I think that a lot of times people can see these tools as threats instead of opportunities. Like, so I don't know, understanding that, like, how do you see these as opportunities and things that will be super beneficial for organizations, but as well for individuals?
Yeah, huge question. So let's talk about Copilot because we are like a power platform. This is a power platform dynamics style podcast. I mean, we mentioned a little bit before the episode started that you had a few projects that you were working on in Copilot, which is super cool. So I'd love to hear more about that. If I'm being completely honest, and you guys can call me out on it, whoever's listening, I haven't seen anything mission critical in production yet. And I spoke to this with Sean Astrahan, who does the Architects Accelerator, and he said this, and it kind of sparked in my mind, and I was like, I think that's true. Like, I don't think anyone's really using it right now to its full. I don't want to say to its full potential, because I think they are. I just don't think its potential it's to the point that it can be yet. Now, that's not to say that in a year, in 6 months, in 3 months, it won't be there. I genuinely think it will. I just think the technology has a little bit of catching up to do in comparison to other generative AI out there. With that being said, I'm a huge fan. As you know, I built a course on AI Builder, so I do genuinely love the way it integrates with Microsoft products. I think that's a huge USP. So many companies are wedded to Microsoft in terms of their cloud. So I definitely think it's worth learning those skills. And you mentioned fear people had, and it's an interesting use case. So without saying too much, there was a project I was working on which automated manual document processing, which is kind of what my course is based on. And a lot of people's jobs were around that. A lot of people spent a lot of time manually populating documents into a database. And they were obviously afraid for their jobs because, that makes sense. If that is your job, then you have a reason to be afraid for your job. And I think there is something to be said where there is genuine fear there, and rightfully so. I like to take it in the mindset where I think technology isn't going to replace us so much as it is going to evolve us. Um, I like to think that they're getting time back to do more creative things. I like to think that they're going to get time back to put themselves out there more, to make good content, um, to showcase themselves. I think that's just. I think the word I'm looking for is express. To express themselves, whether that's internally, whether that's externally. I think taking yourself away from that manual work to do more creative stuff is so important. So I don't want that to be seen like I was like, no, everyone stop doing manual work and just make content. No, not at all. I think anything creative. And the reason I mention content is because it's a genuinely creative process. Like Griffin, I'm probably, not probably, I'm sure you've engaged in that process many times, to think of ideas, to create videos while you're editing in the right way. I've seen you've had a course that you like to promote, so also the effort and value you put into that course. I think to the people who are worried for their jobs, I'd say don't be so much. I know that might sound a little bit I can't think of the word, but I'm not trying to put you down. I think see it as an opportunity, and I think those opportunities will thrive in those changes, because technology has always been changing.
How would you recommend people learn these new technologies that you're talking about, like learning tools like Copilot Studio, and like how would you recommend, or like the first step people should take in upskilling and learning these new technologies?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, I struggle with this, so I'd be keen to hear your opinions and your thoughts on this. But I love to learn by doing. So I like building things specifically with that technology. So I realized that I learned so much more, even more than I think I'm learning, when I'm like on a project with that thing. Do you get that too? Like when you're on a project and you come out of the project and you feel like you may have not learned a lot, but then it comes up again and you're like, oh wait, I already know how to do this, and you just kind of like swing by it. Yeah, I like learning by doing. I think that's really important. Now, finding the time to do that is hard. I always like to recommend people build their own portfolios. I think that's a good way to get stuck in with new technology. But that's all I've got, man. I mean, like I really struggle with that, honestly. So I'd be keen to hear your thoughts and what people can do.
Well, I think that is great advice. I think something that is really cool about the Power Platform community is people are like pretty directly incentivized to share what they're learning, And so like the fact that something like an MVP program exists where people dedicate a ton of time and effort to just sharing what they're learning. So I think that like step one could be just, watching some YouTube videos or listening to something, or reading some LinkedIn posts or blogs or whatever. Like I don't think it has to be that crazy, but I would agree in that like I was put on, you mentioned and wanted to hear more. So I was staffed on 2 different Copilot Studio projects this summer, and again, not to say too much. One, we were basically building a chatbot for their website that would be able to answer questions based off of some knowledge articles. And while it brought a lot of value, it wasn't like earth shattering, I guess, by any means. Like fairly straightforward, use case. Another one was basically this company, they use Dynamics customer service, but all of their ERP information, so like their invoices, shipping, inventory, all that stuff is stored in a non-Dynamics ERP system. And so we actually built a custom agent that would sit in the customer service app that would be able to go and gather information out of that system with a custom connector, basically. And so that one was a little bit cooler. And I think this was like right at the time. I mean, Microsoft Copilot Studio wasn't just announced, but like there was, and I guess I haven't checked up on it now because I'm not actively developing in it. There is like almost no content out there about Microsoft Copilot Studio in like this summer. Like it was so new, like there was nothing out there, Yeah. And so getting these weird bugs and issues and like, why is it repeating itself? This doesn't make any sense. What does this setting do? I have no idea. How do I make it do this? And so that kind of sparked a lot of the videos, I guess, that I had made, I guess, this summer and fall, little tutorial videos, which ironically are doing performance-wise really well, thankfully. But nonetheless, like I was going through that, and there was no way I could have learned what I did about Copilot Studio without just going through those projects. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like actually doing and like, okay, I need to click on this, and then I need to click on this, and then this is where I can set that, and like those just little nuance details, I guess, that that pop up that you need to be aware of. So that was super cool. I agree. I completely agree, though. Like, I think from a perspective of like wanting to take a certification for the first time, like if I wanted to take the PL 900 or the PL 200 for the first time, I think the learning modules and stuff on Microsoft Learn are great, but like you need to click around the Maker portal at some point before you can go and take the exam. You know what I mean? Like, you need to at least understand, like, oh wait, no, this is how I create a table, and this is how I can add it to the model-driven app and actually now interact with it. Oh, I understand how these views kind of work now when I'm seeing them in an app. So like, I think that at some point, you just gotta get in there and get dirty, I guess. So.
100%. And I think on that, Griffin, like, how do I say this without people hating me? So the Microsoft exams, I have quite a few posts that show you how to pass them in a week. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and sit here and say I understood every single ounce of what I was being asked in those exams. Like, I remember being asked about views and tables when I was doing my PL 900 when I was still, and I had no experience with model-driven apps when I was doing that. And I had to conceptualize what a view was in my mind. And it was trying to build these connections that just weren't there because I had actually never seen what a view actually is. But when you actually start working in dynamics and model-driven apps, you start seeing, oh, that's it. Like, it's literally to just see different records. That's all a view is.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I had no idea what that was. So I think, just to echo what you said, there is so much value in just clicking around, 100%.
Yeah. What areas of the Power Platform, or maybe even beyond, like, are you particularly eager to learn about and explore right now, like in this time?
Good question. Power Pages is really cool. Like, I always liked dipping into the pro code side of things. So I like Power Pages, to be completely honest, not too much experience on it, just a brief kind of flash. But I do like Power Pages, and I think Azure integration is underrated. I think that connection to the rest of the M365 ecosystem is a genuine point people can capitalize on. I think that is really cool, and I think it's a skill that people don't that companies want more of. So I'd say Azure integration and also a little bit of Power Pages. I think those are probably my two next go-tos.
Sure. Both, I gotta admit, both of those things sound scary and intimidating to me because I have zero. I've said this a couple of times before. I have zero like coding experience or computer science background. I was in business college and thought I wanted to be an accountant, and in my last semester was like, I'm not doing this, so I never became an accountant. So that's like my background. So the idea. I remember one time I mentioned to a friend of mine, like outside of work, who is like a computer software major and like he codes. I mentioned that like sometimes I'll have to read like some fetch XML or whatever. And he was like, did you just say fetch XML? Like he started like making fun of me, and it was completely harmless, but like, it's just funny. So you're talking about the pro code side of things. More power to you, man. That stuff at this point scares me, but maybe I'm just being soft. I don't know.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it scared me too, and it still scares me to this day. Can I tell you a secret? With my stupid 22 years of experience, I'll probably learn this wrong, that this is wrong in the hard way, but this is something I believe now. Maybe it's not true, but I think people who don't code think coders are actually smarter than they really are. Now, don't take that the wrong way. I think coders are extremely intelligent people. More power to all of them. And I think the work they're doing is amazing. But I think once you start building those foundations, things start clicking for you. And I would argue that a lot of Power Platform developers already have those foundations built in them. Like, you know what a variable is, you know what fetch XML is, so therefore you could probably put together some programming concepts as well with that. I think there's a lot of transferable skills. So I'd say also just if you want my advice, because I did do quite a bit of JavaScript integration from someone who didn't know too much code, and I like to think I know a decent amount now. I definitely say, don't be afraid of it. Like, especially with generative AI nowadays, I think it helps so much. And yeah, it's like for me, it's a constant teacher. So yeah, I think don't be scared of it too much. So yeah, if you want to dive in, reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can hopefully give you some pointers.
Sure. No, absolutely. I have one last topic I wanted to discuss with you before we're out of time here. And it was that you mentioned, and I think a lot of people can maybe resonate with this. You mentioned that, maybe growing up or just kind of like culturally, you hear this concept that like staying in the same role or staying at the same employer is like the right way to do things, and like that's what good people do.
Mm.
Um, like you mentioned that you've had I don't want to make you sound like a bad person, but like have had a switch in mindset as far as like how you approach that. I kind of wanted to tell you like what has like that mindset shift taught you about your career, and maybe you could call it your career mobility, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, I think I want to start this off by saying there is nothing wrong with people who want to stay at one company and retire there and build their pension there. I think there is a lot of respect in that. A lot of people love that security, and more power to them. So yeah, I think if that is you, definitely no disrespect in that regard. I think when it comes to me, it's all about growth and it's all about building who I am as a person and also my skills. I think once I see that plateau, or once I see that kind of stopping, that's when I'd say, all right, maybe I need to either look for another opportunity within the role I'm in or look for another opportunity elsewhere. So that's kind of one aspect to it. Another aspect is, and I feel like some people might be able to relate to this, and there's nothing wrong with the companies doing this, but it's something that we do as humans. When someone sees you're good at something, they're going to make you consistently do that thing until it becomes almost a chore. And I think there's nothing wrong, again, with the companies doing this, but that kind of hinders your growth because you're doing similar things that you've done before, and it just turns into putting more hours into something that you kind of not already know, because you can always get better at something, but I'd say you'd want to explore other horizons, and you're kind of being stuck in this horizon, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Hopefully that clicks. But yeah, I think once you start getting into those routines, those chores, and you're like, you know what, I kind of want to learn this skill, and there's some opportunities around that skill, I'd say don't be afraid to make that jump. I think after COVID, the playbook got thrown out the window, didn't it? I was in university when all that happened, but seeing so many people lose their jobs was difficult to see. I was in my internship when I saw, I think it was Salesforce letting go of so much of their workforce, and friends of mine losing their jobs there. And then even companies like X, Elon Musk, what did he reduce 20% of the people working there? Like a lot of people in fields similar to you and I losing their jobs. I think that idea of security went out the window.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely say there was a big shift in mindset for me there.
Yeah, and I think spaces like software and tech are already naturally, I don't know, more volatile, I guess, in
Mm,
that sense, because a lot of companies are pursuing, innovation in, rapid ways. So I do get that. But I resonate with what you're saying as far as like continuing to grow.
mm,
Like I feel like I have some like friends outside of work where it's like, oh, if you're not switching companies every 2 to 4 years, like you're underpaid, blah blah blah.
mm,
Like you need to be, whatever. And I see their arguments. And I guess I can't necessarily, I don't know if I can say I have enough experience to be able to disagree against it. But also, I'm like, okay, but what about the person that's like really loves where they're at and they feel like they are able to continue to grow? You know what I mean? And
Mm,
so I don't feel
mm,
like, a lot of times I feel like when people say things like that, it's coming from like to me, it comes off as like a blanket statement of like, oh, if you're not, if you're not changing employers every 3 years, then like you're missing out. But like, okay, well, what if my employer continues to make me feel valuable and like where I'm at, and that I continue to feel like it's fair and equitable? You know what I mean? And that
mm.
continue to give me opportunities to grow. So, I I do agree. I feel like if someone is in a situation where they feel like it's been, a year, 2 years without any opportunities for growth, and they feel like it's, it's not necessarily fair, or other
Mm.
things like that, like more power to you. And I'm not gonna hate on anybody for what they think is best for them. But I also think
Yeah.
that some people can be too jumpy, I guess, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. That's I guess my opinion on that. I don't know if you have anything else to add. I'm happy to kick us off over to our after hours happy hour if I get the okay from you, Howden. Is that okay? Is that cool?
Let's do it. Let's do it. No
Okay,
problem. Let's do the
cool,
happy
cool.
hour.
Let's we'll switch over to the after hours happy hour section of the show, and this is right where we can talk about anything and everything outside of work, and kind of some other things, and let our personalities shine through a little bit. We've talked a little bit about health and fitness. I'd love to hear about why you're passionate about health and fitness. I will just take 30 seconds though. So as of last week, I have started, me and my wife want to run a half marathon at the end of May. And I am not a runner. I despise running in every way. I've never been good at running at all. And so we've started, she's been going to, basically, it's called Orange Theory. It's this, they're like cardio hit classes, where you're doing weights or running on treadmill or like the row machines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I've been starting that, and I'm 3 days in, and I am very sore today. So, but it's okay. It's good for me. That's where I'm at right now with my health and fitness journey. But I'd love to give you the floor, and talk about why you're passionate about health and fitness.
Yeah, I mean, multiple. Firstly, good luck. That is quite an endeavor you've started for yourself. So I wish you
Yeah,
all the best. I also hate running and I hate cardio. I need to do more of it, but I suck at it. So yeah, best of luck with that, Griffin. um, yeah, I think we said we won't talk about work, but it's the nature of the job, isn't it? We sit down all day. Um, it's good to get your body moving. I think,
for sure.
especially if we're not being, necessarily physical. That I think there's something to be said about the confidence it gives you, the way you look. I think there's something to be said about that. Not to say I look incredible or anything, but I think I definitely look better than I did when I was 15 or 16, and not taking care of myself in that way. So I think there's something to be said for confidence. There's something to be said for headspace. Going off and having that hour to yourself is really, really nice. And then I definitely say it's just something to do outside of work, and I think it's
Yeah.
important that people have something that grounds them. Even though I hate getting up in the mornings to go, when I'm there, I'm usually quite happy. So yeah, I think it's important to have that thing and not just be so invested in the screen.
I think as overall health too, like watching what you eat is phenomenal. Like I'm
Oh
not I'm
yeah.
not gonna come on here and say you don't need to diet or watch what you eat. But I think one of the bigger things is, like, if you think about just how active people's lifestyles were 100 years ago compared to
Mm,
now, like people were walking everywhere, biking everywhere, were working with their hands, were standing, moving all day for work. And now most people have some form of job where, yeah, like you're saying, it's not physical at all.
mm,
And so thus naturally you are like, you could eat the exact same amount of food as you did with that job and become really unhealthy really quickly because you're just simply not, outputting that energy. And so I
mm,
think that, like, I just think in some way it's Yeah, I feel like that's like the one of the real reasons why, especially, people love to poke fun at Americans, why America especially has such a health crisis is because people,
Yeah.
I mean, and thank goodness for technology and cars and, and whatnot. But at the same time, too, we're not necessarily designed in that way, just as like humans, I guess. So
Oh,
I,
agreed.
I think that's kind of like the biggest miss like that people have. And I'm like the least science-based health and fitness person on the planet. Like I'm like, yeah, just go and sweat a little bit or lift something that feels heavy and like you're good, like just so I think people overcomplicate it like and everything. But I do agree with what you're saying as far as like it's therapeutic in a way, and helps you because you were able to go and do something that made you feel good, then you have more confidence to excel in things like leading a certain meeting or, building a power
Mm.
app because you saw yourself, man, I ran 1 mile. Like I can do anything. Now I can build this power app. You like carry
Mm.
that confidence
Mm.
into, whatever it is that you do. So I
Yeah.
completely agree. I'd love to ask you as well. So something I think is super cool, but I know absolutely nothing about is MMA, mixed martial
Yeah.
arts. Like,
Yeah.
what's the story here? Why are you so passionate about MMA? Yeah, I want to ask that first, and then I have follow-up questions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I love watching MMA. I think that's where it started. I started watching Conor McGregor. I think a lot of people did, and yeah, he just absolutely okay. There's questions to be said about him now, but back then he was the man. Like the way he used to talk about people and kind of have those press conferences in a way that no one else would. It was just so fun to watch, and we've all seen the videos. So I think there's something to be said about his personality. Um, and then he kind of did the Floyd Mayweather thing, and kind of went downhill from there. But we won't talk about that. I just love it, man, and I think I took that watching into actually doing it when I came into university. So I did MMA for a couple of I was going to say a couple of years, about a year. And then, yeah, genuinely did jujitsu for a while. And I started doing it with one of my friends. And he was super into it. Like he does amateur fighting and stuff now. So he was super into it. So I saw myself kind of here and he was kind of just growing. And like, I was like beating him and he was beating me. And then slowly he just started like absolutely destroying me to a point that I couldn't even win. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to do it anymore because my pride was hurt. So yeah, don't take my word for that. But like, being in that experience and seeing the way people train, the way people eat, and kind of what they can do, just huge respect for people in that community and putting their kind of life and limb on the line. Like, it's crazy how much horror shows you see just by being in an MMA gym. People like breaking their hands and that, and it's just nasty. So yeah, huge respect for people doing that. But yeah, I couldn't do it anymore. But yeah, I love to watch it, like to do it. But yeah, not doing it anymore, unfortunately.
Sure. I feel like MMA is just continuing to grow more and more. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
obviously, I feel like UFC in general is like that sport specifically is growing a lot, but even just like MMA in general, like it still blows. It makes me laugh a little bit every time I like see on Instagram like Mark Zuckerberg like doing MMA. Like I don't know if you're
yeah.
familiar with like the
Oh
fact that he's
yeah,
involved and super passionate about it
yeah.
now. He's growing out his hair a little bit.
Oh
It's just like
gosh, you
I don't
got a
know. It's just
surfboard.
funny. Like, yeah, like the people that that enjoy it and things. So super
Yeah.
cool, man. Howden, I really appreciate the time of you just coming on here and hanging out with me and sharing your expertise. Truly, if people were impacted by this conversation or something that you said, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you or reach out to you?
Yeah, shout me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place. I've been trying to reduce my screen time, so the replies are a bit slower. I have a newsletter at poweracademy.com, so take a look at that. And there's also an email you can reply to on there. So yeah, email me if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to help. And yeah, all the best to all of your journeys. Hopefully you got something out of this.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be sure to link your LinkedIn down in the description down below. So Howden, thanks again for being here, and thank you to you for sticking to the end of the video. My name is Griffin Lickfeld, the host of the Citizen Developer channel and Power Talks series, podcast, whatever, conversation, whatever you want to call it. I'm excited to connect with you in the next one.